All right, it's time to start. So some of these questions are going to be a little obscure. Can't make it too easy. So if you don't understand a question, you can ask, and there's no prizes.
Boo. I already did that.
All right, so here's a sample question. So if you know the answer to this question, raise your hand. Nobody? Really?
Yes.
Yes.
D.
C.
B.
C.
C.
Prize though.
No, there's no prize.
You copied me that.
I said it first.
Well, Paul, even if there were prizes, you wouldn't get one.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. What percentage of the Fortune 500 use Progress products?
A.
B.
A.
B.
B. Progress Software Corporation was founded in?
C.
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 Yeah, everyone knows that one now.
Well, you did it last year.
Well, I did the history talk last year. I didn't do the trivia. But there's plenty of other questions here that have nothing to do with Progress history. So the original name of Progress Software?
A.
Yep. That's right. OpenEdge version 11.1 was released in C. Yes. Sorry about that. Okay, which of the following principles is not used when designing software? C. People do pair programming, but that's not used for designing. Which of the following is not used by the OpenEdge database manager? Right, B. When a database record is updated, it must be locked in exclusive mode to ensure transaction integrity. True or false? Okay, that's the end of the easy ones.
Paul got that wrong.
The release statement can be used to release an exclusive lock on a record. All right, I lied. There's a few other easy ones. Maximum record length in an OpenEdge record database. A database record or table row cannot be larger than a database block. False. The father of the relational model of databases is considered to be?
C.
E.
No, not D.
E.
C.
C. Where's your name, Gus?
C. However, Larry Ellison was one of the implementers of the first relational database when he was working at IBM as a what?
Didn't you and I go see COD at MIT?
Yeah.
Okay.
In procedural programming, spaghetti code is historically described as bad code. The equivalent in object-oriented programming is?
Object-oriented programming.
All of those. Rotini, because I don't know what it is.
No, it's lasagna code because it's layer after layer after layer after layer. There's another question about spaghetti coding, pasta coding later. All right, see, so, sorry, I hit the button twice. The first 64-bit operating supported by Progress Software was... It was D. But of course, none of these are supported anymore. AIX was the last one to go, which I think is a shame. The data type in Progress is...
C.
All right, first operating system with symmetric multiprocessing to be supported by Progress was... Mike, you were importing, of course you...
I should leave.
Yeah, it was Dynix, which was on Sequent machines. And when I first started doing performance work on the database, I did it all on a Sequent box that we had. It had Intel 386 microprocessors, 16 megahertz processors. The world is a little different these days. And it had a few Fujitsu Eagle disk drives, 320 megabytes. Yeah, those were big drives. Speaking of big, eventually a customer managed to get a database that was 2 gigabytes. And back in those days, most people had small disks, and so you could put extents on multiple different disks to make a bigger thing. So eventually a customer hit the 2 gigabyte size boundary and crashed because we had a bug, which we then had to fix, but we didn't have 2 gigabytes of disk space.
So I had to go round up all the Sun disks and daisy chain them together to try to aggregate up to 2 gig. We never made it though.
Yeah. And then a couple years later, that same customer hit 4 gigabytes. And the same thing happened. Well, we fixed their problem. Okay, the largest possible database in the OpenEdge database is this is a trick question. It's D. Okay, so which database have we never had a data server for? Right, MySQL.
Which is not really true because there was the generic ODBC data server that worked with MySQL.
Well, it did work with MySQL, but it wasn't MySQL specific like some of the other ones we had, like the Oracle one and the Sybase one. When did Progress open the Tech Support Center in Rotterdam? And if you work in the Tech Support Center, you can't answer. No, actually, it was B. The number of office buildings that Progress has occupied since moving from the town of Billerica to Oak Park Drive in Bedford is, we moved a couple times.
Is C. Well, hold on. This is a trick question.
There were 2 on Oak Park.
Oh, but there was more than one building on Oak Park.
It's A.
You're right, it's A.
Yeah. Because 14 Oak Park is 2 buildings.
Yeah, but we were in 5 Oak Park first, and then we bought some other buildings. So we had more than just those. So the number of buildings Progress currently occupies. None, right. Don't need any space anymore. What'd they do with the computers? The data center?
Oh, they moved it to Marlboro
Well, that got moved outside.
a long time ago.
Well, I know it got moved somewhere, but I never knew where.
Marlboro, Mass.
Ah. Which release was the first to support 64-bit Windows? It was 10.2a.
Gus Björklund?
Yep.
They put it off as long as they could.
Yeah. Which of the following operating systems has Progress been ported to? Right. Plus a whole host of others. We had over 100 when we peaked out on operating systems. They were all mostly Unix. Mike's favorite, though, was the Adiza.
That's right.
The VAX VMS, that was the best.
I worked on the VAX VMS port. That was not on the port itself, but on fixing bugs, because that was the first thing I did when I got hired. They made me fix bugs in VMS, which I was able to do because I'd been working on VMS earlier, so I knew a lot about how to program for VMS. So it's all of them. First Progress employee. When was OpenEdge 10 first released?
Tricky, they're close to
A. C.
D.
Nobody's going to say D. It was A. And it lasted a good long while.
That was back when all releases were December.
Yeah, that's right. And we had a different numbering scheme than we do now. And back in those days, there were no long-term support releases. I argued about that for years, but nobody wanted to do it.
Well, some would argue that any 0.A release was probably not a deployment release.
Well, of course, but customers need two different things at different times. When you're doing development work, you want the latest and greatest features so you can take advantage of them in your application. But somebody who's deployed an application like a bank doesn't want your shitty new release. The OpenEdge version 11.7 was released in D. Yeah. Everybody knows that because it's brand new, relatively speaking. C. This is it.
I'm surprised you have that slide.
Okay, which of the following is not an app server operating mode? D. SaaS, SAS is an acronym for right, B. ABL is an abbreviation for yeah, well, got to have some easy ones. Which type of bytecode does the ABL virtual machine interpret? It's, oops, C. Which Amazon founder was the first .com executive to be named Time Magazine's Person of the Year? B. Okay, pasta theory of programming, object-oriented code is?
Lasagna.
Did we listen?
No, you're wrong. It's ravioli. So in ravioli code, you have lots of small pieces that each do one thing and do it well. But nobody can figure out what the relationship of all the ravioli pieces is. Which Google vice president is regarded as the father of the internet? A. Tim Berners-Lee was the father of the web. And Larry Roberts was one of the early internet developers. And then he became CEO of a company called Telnet, which implemented early internet stuff. And I know that because I worked there for a while. The original name of the data server products was? Yep, C. Which of the following was never a database gateway product? B. I had a friend who was a consultant, and he would develop small applications for various businesses in the area where we lived. And one day he learned about DBase. So he started using DBase for some of his projects. And so he was really thrilled. He's telling me how easy it is and stuff. And then 6 months later, I'm having lunch with him, and he says, "You know, Gus, making software is hard." The first non-progress database to be supported by the 4GL was? It was A, Oracle.
Version 6.
Yeah, that was in version 6, where another interesting and useful feature came, which is version 6 was the first release where you could connect to more than one database. So your 4GL code could connect to 2 or 5 progress databases. Before that, you couldn't.
Or you can connect to an Oracle and a Progress database.
Right. And we had this cheesy two-phase commit that we implemented if you were mixing Progress and Oracle. And then we had a different cheesy two-phase commit for if you had more than one Progress database. And eventually we fixed that, but in the first release, it was not correctly implemented. So worked, but had some flaws. All right. To distinguish themselves from Microsoft SQL Server, Sybase renamed it SQL Server 2. It's D. What happened is Sybase sold a copy of the Sybase SQL Server code to Microsoft. But then they continued with their own version. So they gave them a code drop and got some money for it, and then they went in separate directions. But they couldn't call both products SQL Server. Oracle introduced row-level locking in its database in 1988. Microsoft introduced it in 2000, yeah. Before that, SQL Server only had page-level locking. So if you locked a row in a table, all the other rows in that same page got locked too. Who wrote the code for supporting more than one database at a time in the 4GL? It was not me. It was Mary. Which of the following people was the first development manager for the data server group? The data server development group. Nobody? Okay, it was A, Amnon Weissman, who was a very opinionated Israeli. But he was also wicked smart. Now, before he came to Progress, Amnon worked at Wang on their office system. I forget what it was called, which was an interesting product, but that's a story for another day. First Progress release to support client server was? No, you're wrong. It was version 1. Now, version 1 was not released to the public, but it had client server from the very start. It was a little different from today's client server, though, because the client and the server had to be on the same machine. But that was actually not a problem in the beginning, because everybody had Y60 terminals or VT100 terminals to use the 4GL or the applications. So the fact that it was all running on the same machine wasn't a problem.
What was the network protocol?
It was, let's see. It was named pipes with roughly the same kind of messaging protocol that we use today, but simpler, because we made many enhancements to it over the years. So the way that it worked was that when you connected to the database, the server would spawn a client. So the client process was a child of the server, and then the server would talk through the named pipe and tell the client which terminal to connect to. And people in those days had these terminal multiplexer boxes. So you plug a cable into the Unix machine and a bunch of terminals in the other side of the box. Okay, So which release was the first release to have non-host based client server, or I forget what we called it, where the client could be on a separate machine from the server? Okay, that was version 3. Okay, you can use the mark row state method to force a before table record to be created in a changed data set record. True or false? True. A table can be in 2 data sets at the same time. True or false? No, it's true. Which of the following is not a numeric data type in the 4GL? I have a typo there. A, but that needs to be there. That should be added because there's all this stuff that applications need to interface with that has floating point data in it. Which of the following data types cannot be used to store character data? D, correct. Under the covers, D is actually an integer. The first progress release that had after image journaling was it was version 4. Before that, there was no AI. And in version 4, you could have AI, but there was only one after image file. So you couldn't have multiple extents. And if you filled that file up to the 2 gigabyte file limit, then you had a problem. However, you could shut down the database and then switch to reset the AI file to start a new one. The OpenEdge database uses spin locks to do what? Yup. Shared memory self-serving clients were first supported in Progress version what? No, it was 5.2a. B. Oops. B. So at that point, then we had to have shared memory locking. So we implemented this locking scheme that used the test and set instruction, and there were only 2 locks in the database. There was one that locked the entire shared memory segment, and then there was the microtransaction lock, which was held during transaction commit and some other operations. And so there was not much concurrency because all the data structures were locked by a single lock. Which one of these is not one of the ACID properties of transactions? C, yep. The type of transaction logging used to record database changes in the open database is called This is a really geeky database kind of question. It's C. So with physical logging, what you write to the log file is, okay, I updated this string of bytes in block such and such, and then you have an image of what was in there. In logical logging, you log the logical operation, but you don't have an exact image of what got put in the block that got modified. You have, for example, if you have a create operation, then you say you're creating a record, and then there's information about the record you're creating, but it may not be an image of the record. It may be in some other format. And then physiological logging is sort of a combination where it's part of the information is physical and part of it's logical. For example, let's say you want to create a new index entry. So, the log record would contain the value of the key for the index entry, and then the row ID for the record that it refers to. But it doesn't have to say where in the index that entry goes, because the code that implements that recovery note can figure out for itself where to put it. Most appropriate data block size for a database is it's A, yeah. However, it's common for people to do twice the file system block size because the Linux page size is 4K, and that has something to do with the way the Intel processors work that made them do that, and they've kept the page size at 4K ever since. But a lot of people use 8K for database block size, so it's 2 pages. But that works fine. It'd be useful for the database to support 16K blocks these days, or maybe even 32K. But since I don't work there anymore, I have no say in that. Which encryption algorithms can be specified in the 4GL's encrypt function? C, correct. However, you shouldn't use DES anymore because it's obsolete. It's all these encryption algorithms become obsolete because the processor gets faster and faster. So it becomes easier and easier to crack them with brute force. The ABL encode function encrypts data by using a symmetric cipher. False. The OpenEdge 4GL addition operator is polymorphic. True. Okay. In programming, the acronym DRY means what? B. But everyone does it. And sometimes there's a good reason to do that, but often there isn't. The OpenEdge 4GL is primarily a imperative, functional, declarative, or iterative language. A. Oops. Crap, I lost the answer slide. Okay. First release of the Progress 4GL was written in the language C. Now, there is also a fair amount of C++, and there's some Java in various places as well. That was not a good idea. But it's mostly my fault. Because we started using Java at a point where we were implementing a new version of the app server. And stupidly, we thought that doing it in Java would be easier than C, which is what we started with. So the app server broker got implemented in Java. That was not a good idea. Up to version 6.2, the maximum value of the -b parameter was A. Yep. And back then, most of the databases had 1K block size. Except for Sequent had 2K block size. I don't remember why, but they did. And DOS had 512 byte block size. The database server on DOS was a popular thing for small businesses to buy. So they would have like a dentist office with a database server running on DOS or Novell, and then 2 or 3 clients on PCs connected to it. There was a lot of that. OpenEdge database checkpoints are asynchronous, synchronous, bisynchronous, or isochronous. A, you're right. They need to be made isochronous, but that's another story. Which of the following is not a purpose of checkpointing in the OpenEdge database? D. The benevolent dictator for the Linux kernel developers is Ulrich Drepper, Bill Joy, Ingo Molnar, or Linus Torvalds. D. But these other guys, they're benevolent dictators too. Ulrich Drepper is one of the guys that works for Linus Torvalds, and he has charge of some particular releases. So he's the guy who you have to get permission to do check-ins. And one of the things that Linux people do really well is if you want to check in new code, it gets inspected by somebody who knows what they're doing, and so they can say, this is shit code, you can't check this in. Go back and do it over. Torvalds does that a lot. Who said dynamic queries was the best new feature in version 9? No, it was me.
What was process of elimination?
Yeah. Maximum length of a long char variable is it's A. We didn't have any specific good reason for picking A, but we had to pick some number. And I decided, well, nobody should be storing that much data in a long char, so that's enough. Can't have any more than that. Because if you made higher values than that, then the implementation becomes much more difficult. Because now you got to deal with a whole new set of issues. In the ABL, a finally block is executed when? B. Which ABL construct can be used to limit the procedures that can be executed by an app server client? B. What's the app server mode that allows logical connections to multiple app servers? It's C. Which app server procedure is executed as a persistent procedure? A, it's the startup procedure. Which app server parameter can be used to automatically trim an agent after it's been running for a certain period of time? Yeah, D, server lifespan. Which WSA configuration file is used to require SSL or TLS connections by a web services client? I figured we should have some really bizarre questions. It's a trick question. It's none of the above. How many app server repeat statement iterations does it take to screw in a light bulb? C. In the ABL, the root class, the superclass of those classes that do not explicitly inherit from some other class, is called what? A, right. Which of the following is not an access mode of a method? B, correct. A destructor is a kind of method. True or false? True. Which of the following is an invalid object type name? D. That's how you send parameters to include files. Which of the following data member types of a class cannot be declared public? All of them. Okay, in the OpenEdge database, the .db file contains no, it's C. What it does have in it, though, is all of the extent names. So that's how the database finds all the extents, is it looks in the .db file to find out where they are. And then it opens those. So it's neither. A mock index rebuild resets the database damaged flags. Covering your check engine light with black tape is just as useful. True or false? I don't know who discovered this mock index rebuild technique, but when the database damaged flag is on, when you start up the database, it says, hey, something's wrong. The database has been damaged. You better do something about it.
Nah, come on.
So people just turn the flag off.
Tech support figured that one out.
Oh, yeah.
Roy's not here to defend himself.
Yeah. Roy wasn't around when that was invented. Yeah, B. Maximum number of key fields in a composite index is, it's A. Is that a sufficient number, or should it be bigger?
It's crazy. Yeah, I think it's-
Well, hardly anybody reaches that limit. Which of the following is not a standard SQL data type? It's B. However, there's a bunch of SQL databases that do have a bunny data type. But they don't handle different currencies very well. Which of the following is used by the OpenEdge database to provide transaction atomicity and durability? All right, that one's A. In the OpenEdge database, indexes are organized as B trees, red-black trees, AVL trees, or binary trees. A. In the 4GL, share locks can be acquired without an active transaction. True. Exclusive locks can be acquired without an active transaction. True or false? False, right. Which program can be used to perform online backups of an OpenEdge database? B, and it's of these things, all of them can be used for offline backups. If you shut the database down first, you can use any of those, but not for online backups. And the reason you can't, you probably all know this, is that if you, for example, use tar to back up your database while the database is running, tar doesn't know about shared memory, so all the updated blocks that are in shared memory aren't included in the backup. The maximum number of tables that can exist in an OpenEdge database. C. Maximum number of indexes that can exist in an OpenEdge database. D. Yeah. Anybody remember what the limit was in version 6?
was some odd number.
It was very small.
It was a much smaller number. I don't remember the exact value either, but in version 6, there was a set of database pages that had the root blocks of all the indexes. So you could have several of those pages. And then in the database master block, there was a section that listed all of the root, index root lists. So there were 32 DB keys in that list. So you could have 32 lists of index root blocks. So when you filled that up, you couldn't have any more indexes. And so that depended on the block size, how many you could have. That's the end.